In this video, I'll show you how to produce images like this in the most difficult situation possible. Full sun, clear sky, no shade. This shoot took place at Stockton Beach, which is a huge area of sand dunes north of Newcastle in New South Wales, Australia. I've shot there quite a lot before, mostly doing horse shoots, as you can see here, but I've done a lot of other shoots there as well. It's a brilliant place to photograph. Now this shoot was a long time in the planning because I wanted to shoot on the dunes with the lakes in between the sand dunes if I could. So I had to wait for an extended period of heavy rain, and that took quite a few months to happen. So once we had that rain, I knew that we would have lakes in amongst those sand dunes, and I wanted to shoot a fashion shoot in that sort of situation. I love those shots of a figure in the landscape, and this is a brilliant place to do it. Now, I liaised with Mia, the model, beforehand, talking about clothing and the feel of the shoot that we wanted and the logistics of the situation as well, because it's not the easiest place to get to. I had to find some way to get onto the sand dunes. I don't have a four-wheel drive, but luckily I have a friend called Andrew, and he runs a quad bike tour company. So he allowed us to use his Hummer bus to get our crew, which is Mia, Mark, my assistant, and myself, out onto the sand dunes. They drove us out there, dropped us off for a few hours, and then came and picked us up later, which was great. We had a terrific day out there on the sand dunes. Now the planning of this shoot does take a little bit of effort, because when you're shooting on sand dunes, there's a couple of things you need to know. You don't want to be out there on a windy day, as I'll explain later. You don't want to be out there on a Monday morning either, because you're likely to have four-wheel drive tracks all over those sand dunes. So we wanted to have this shoot on a Friday afternoon if we could, so that gave us the week for the wind to dissipate all of those or most of those four-wheel drive tracks on the dunes. I wanted to get a more natural sort of a feel, but you'll notice in some of these shots we still have a couple of wheel tracks, which doesn't bother me particularly much. I also wanted to shoot towards the sun, which was going to cause a big problem for the gear that I've got. I don't have sophisticated equipment, and shooting towards the sun is the most challenging way to shoot. So I knew I needed some other sort of light source. I had a studio battery-powered strobe that I took out with me. It's 600 watts. So I was hoping that it was going to be powerful enough to be able to use that in conjunction with that backlight from the sun. And it worked out really well. Here's a couple of examples of shots without flash, the way that I would have shot if I was shooting natural light, and some shots with flash. You'll see the difference that the flash makes. And in this situation, it makes the shots look like a studio image, like the image was shot in studio with sand dunes and all that sort of stuff indoors, because we've got that studio style lighting our model, and we've got the backlight from the sun. I also planned this shoot to be mid-afternoon to late afternoon, because I know the direction that I'll be shooting to the west means that at about 4 o'clock in the afternoon, that sun's up on a particular angle that is going to rake across the dunes. It's going to show me the shape and the contours and the texture of those dunes. Waiting until later in the day, maybe just before sunset, I'm just going to get dark shadowed dunes if I shoot towards the west. So I wanted the angle of the sun to be the same or close to the angle of those sand dunes, so that I got that beautiful light down across the dunes. So we began shooting at about 4 p.m. in the afternoon. I had an assistant there to help me, Mark. He's one of my ex-students, and I couldn't have done it without him, because carrying all this stuff over the sand dunes is not the easiest thing in the world. So there were the three of us out there. I shot a lot of shots with that 600 watt studio strobe. I didn't have any particular modifiers on the front. I just had the cone on the front of that flash, because I didn't want to deplete any of the power. I wanted as much power as I possibly could. So just putting the reflector cone on the front of that strobe allowed more light to go forward and allowed me to be able to balance that light with the sunlight as best I possibly could. I also shot some available light. Later on, as that sun got lower in the sky, Mia was able to turn her face towards that sun, and we got some beautiful late afternoon light on those dunes. So I mixed up that lighting, a little bit of flash, a little bit of available light. At the end of this video, you'll see some examples of some black and white images, and you'll see the results that we get with both color through this video and with black and white. I'm going to show you probably 60, 70, 80 different images that I got on the day, so you'll be able to see them as I shot them and I'll explain to you the various different scenarios that we shot and the settings and the reasons why I took those images. So hang around till the end to see those black and white images. I'm sure you'll be impressed. We began the shoot with this red dress that Mia had brought along. I suggested that she bring a red dress because I knew we'd be shooting with blue skies, and I thought the red with the warm tone of the sand would work really well. You can see the light that we're using. You can see that strobe light because she's got a shadow behind her, which looks very unusual because obviously your brain sees that sun coming from the back, but to have another equivalent shadow behind her on the sand dunes just looks really unusual. I like it. I did try to use a polarizer at one stage when I was shooting towards the north, because if you shoot towards the north and the south, you get the maximum polarizing effect in that sky. But it was just a bit too blue and it was a bit too false and artificial. So I didn't use the polarizer for any other shots after that. Because I was shooting towards the sun in a lot of these shots, I did get a bit of lens flare, or a lot of lens flare in some situations. Some shots I really loved it, other shots I wasn't real keen on it, but I think it adds to some of these shots to have that sun flare in there. We moved the shot around towards the west so I could shoot directly towards the sun, which is a difficult situation because you've got that sunlight on your lens and you can get lens flare. I wanted to put the water in the foreground. I wanted to use that water as much as I could because it's an unusual situation being out on the dunes. That flare doesn't look too bad. I quite like most of it. It's beautiful light. When you get that sunlight behind Mia and we get the flashlight on the front of her, it almost looks like a studio shoot, which I've mentioned before. I tried different viewpoints, different compositions. I included the sun in some shots, which ups the difficulty even more. And my camera, being a cheapo camera, it doesn't really cope particularly well with that really bright sunlight. You'll never get detail in that sun, but to try and get as much detail in that western sky is difficult. But still, I don't mind the shots that I got. The exposure is critical when you're shooting in this situation, particularly with your subject. You want to make sure that your subject is well exposed. That's the priority. But if you can get the background well exposed as well, that's great. If not, then we need to compromise a little bit. Now I changed to split light. So I had the sun lighting Mia on camera right, and I had the flash lighting her on camera left. So I had her facing camera left because I could control that light much more on her face than the sunlight, but that worked really well as well. Now I don't usually tell you what sort of camera and lens and gear I use for these shoots because it really doesn't make a lot of difference. You could shoot these shots with any SLR mirrorless camera. Any camera that can synchronize with the flash that has manual settings will be fine. But my camera on the day was a D5600, which is an APS-C camera. I had my standard kit lens, my zoom, which was my 18 to 55, and I also took a 70 to 200 because I wanted to get some distance shots as well. So that was my camera gear. I had my 600 watt flash and I shot that as a bare bulb pretty much because I wanted to get as much power as possible, as I mentioned before. So the lighting on Mia's face was going to be critical. I didn't particularly want that light to be side lighting her to give me that Rembrandt or the loop light or anything like that. I wanted to have that perfect light on Mia's face. So for all of these shots, or 90% of them, we turned Mia's nose directly towards the flash. So that gave us that beautiful frontal light on her face, very attractive light, not that we need it because Mia's amazing. And also the power of that flash was able to stabilize my exposure with that background. Now the settings that I used on my camera for this situation, it did vary a little bit. For most of these shots though, I shot at ISO 100. I had my shutter speed at 1/200th of a second because I wanted to synchronize with my flash. So that's my highest sync speed on my camera. And I varied my aperture, but it was mostly around f16, f22, because that light is really bright that I'm shooting into. The sky behind the sun or around the sun in that western sky is really, really bright. So I knew that I would have to drop my aperture down really small to be able to get some detail in that sky. In some images I wasn't able to do that, but a lot of the images I did get some color in that sky, which I'm quite pleased about. But if I was shooting available light, I wouldn't be able to do that because that flashlight allowed me to drop my aperture down and give me enough light on the front of Mia to balance that light with the background. Once you change into the white dress, again, that exposure is more critical now. Because she's got a white dress, I don't want to overexpose it. but we got some great shots of her in that white dress, various different compositions, using those leading lines of the edges of the water.
I knew you'd fit me like a glove the day I fell in love with the way you said my name. I know it sounds crazy, baby, try to understand me, please do. Ooh, ooh, ooh. I knew you'd fit me like a glove the day I fell in love with the pictures in my head. I know it sounds crazy, maybe one day I could share them with you.
Then we got Mia changed again and we did some fun jumping shots. Her face was always turned towards the flash so that we could control that light. There's a bit of flare in there. I wanted to try and get her jumping in front of the sun so that flare was minimised. So we tried a few things. It was good fun and it helped to break up the shoot as well, to get some fun shots and allow her to have a bit of fun.
And I really don't mind waiting as long as it takes you. I've been searching for so long, so what's another?
So our model Mia performed perfectly. Beforehand, we did do a little bit of chatting about what sort of posing we were going to do, and the posing on the day was a collaboration between the two of us. I would suggest poses to Mia, and she would put on that pose and do a couple of variations so that she felt comfortable and her body just fell into those poses. And that's a much better way to do it, rather than me dictating every little thing for her to do. I don't like her particularly freestyling too much because it puts a lot of pressure on her. As you've seen with some of our other videos, I talk about how I pose people, and it's always a bit of a collaboration between the photographer and the model. But ultimately, it's my responsibility to get her in a pose that's going to look good, that's going to make her look attractive. When we moved to the short white dress, we decided that we were going to get Mia in the lake. We were very careful with that. We didn't want her to sink down or to go in too deeply, but to get her feet wet, just to make that shot look a little bit different, get a bit of reflection on the water. We did have a few planes flying overhead because this is right next to Williamtown Airport. So we had a few planes flying overhead, so we had a bit of fun with that. When we've shot up there before, we have a few Air Force planes buzzing around, particularly if we're doing swimwear or nude shots on the dunes. We get a lot of pilots coming down for a closer look. I also did a couple of variations in processing with these shots. So you can have a look at these. Sometimes I was happy with them, sometimes I wasn't, but most of all I like the plain colour images and some of the black and whites as well. We moved to a different lake, or a different part of the lake, and we got Mia in there again. I wanted to do some shots side lit with that backlight from the sun in there as well, and it looked brilliant. The lighting on the landscape or on the dunes and the water looked amazing. When we had Mia in the water, I wanted to add just a little bit of extra to that image, so I asked her to wiggle her toes. When she wiggles her toes, we get those concentric circles of waves moving out from her, which helps to attract attention to her in that composition. Now, when you're working on sand, it adds a little bit of complication to things. You don't particularly want to be out on the sand on a windy day. I've done that before in gale force winds and it's not very pleasant. You do get some unusual images, but you've got to be so careful of your gear. Your gear, you don't want to get sand in your gear because it's going to cause problems. The other thing that sand is a problem with is just putting your stuff down. Whenever you want to put your bag down, put your camera down anywhere to do something, you need to make sure there's not going to get sand in it. We had a bit of an issue because we were shooting around lakes within the sand dunes. We had an issue with quicksand. Whenever sand and seawater mix, or any sort of water mix together, you'll get pockets of very fluid, viscous sand that if you stand on it, you start to sink down. And there were a couple of times when Mia did start to sink down in those areas, so we had to move her from one place to another. So be careful of that quicksand. I thought, because I watched a lot of Tarzan movies when I was a kid, that it was a bit of a myth, but it's not. Quicksand exists. It's not as dangerous as people think it is, but just stay away from it. The other thing you need to be careful of is marks in the sand. If you're posing your model in a particular place, every time she moves around, moves her feet, touches the sand with her hands, she's going to put marks in that sand. So try to position her at a position to start with and then just move her back. each time you change the pose, because that's going to give you fresh sand. You don't want her to walk into the back of the shot to pose because you're going to have footprints in that background. I didn't always do that properly, but it's going to make your life a lot easier if you've got clear sand rather than footprints and handprints all over the place. After that, we put the flash away and we decided just to use the available sunlight. Because the sun had gotten low in the sky, it was dull enough so that Mia could turn her face towards that sun. So we got her up on a very high sand dune and I shot from low down using my 200mm on my zoom. And I just asked Mia to do a few poses up there. I shouted a few things to her just to help her with the composition of the shot and the direction I wanted her to look. But again, she just wandered around, did some beautiful poses, and I shot them as she went. Very simple, minimalist sort of shots, but I think they worked really well.
I knew you'd fit me like a glove the day I fell in love with a dream of me and you. I know it sounds crazy, baby, try to understand me, please do. Ooh, ooh, ooh.
To finish off the shoot, I wanted to do some fashion shots. So I wanted Mia in this fashion outfit, which we'd already prepared beforehand so that she knew what to bring. I wanted her with heels on, which can sometimes be a bit of an issue on sand dunes. But if you've pre-planned and you bring along a small piece of plywood for her to stand on, you can hide it reasonably well in the sand, and it allows her to wear those high heels in the sand, which looks so much better with the outfit that we've got. So again, I just asked Mia to freestyle these shots. I didn't give her too many instructions, just asked her to freestyle, move around a little bit, have a little bit of fun with the shots, and we used that late afternoon light to give us the lighting that we needed, and it looked brilliant. Again, very minimalist. That's a great thing about shooting in the sand dunes, is that there's not much else up there to ruin your composition. It's a very simple, easy composition to do. Now, as I mentioned before, Mark assisted me with this shoot, which was really handy. He did take his camera along and he shot a few shots as we were doing various different things. When I was busy, he took a few shots of Mia as well. So here are a few of Mark's shots that he shot through the day.
I knew you'd fit me like a glove the day I fell in love with the way you said my name. I know it sounds crazy, baby, try to understand me, please do. Ooh, ooh, ooh. I knew you'd fit me like a glove the day I fell in love with the pictures in my head. I know it sounds crazy, maybe one day I could share them with you. Ooh, ooh, ooh. And I really don't mind.
As promised, here are some black and white variations on some of those shots. I think they work really well in black and white, depending on the image, but have a look at some of these.
I knew you'd fit me like a glove the day I fell in love with the way you said my name. I know it sounds crazy, baby, try to understand me, please do. Ooh, ooh, ooh. I knew you'd fit me like a glove the day I fell in love with the pictures in my head. I know it sounds crazy, maybe one day I could share them with you. Ooh, ooh, ooh. And I really don't mind waiting as long as it takes you. I've been searching for so long, so what's another week or two? 'Cause every time I see you, life goes bright. The moon, the stars, the fireflies, they light. It seems as if the world stopped turning round and round. Oh, since I found you.
If you get the chance to shoot on some sand dunes, with a bit of pre-planning and some cooperation from the weather, you can get some amazing images just like this. It's not a difficult situation. You just have to think about it, plan ahead, take your time, and get some amazing images.